And here we are back for part 2, Actualizing Tendency. We're going to talk about Carl Rogers. So we got an innate continual presence that quietly guides the individual towards genetically determined potentials. Yeah and no, okay, ideally, but genetics does bless us and or curse us with certain qualities, and so some we may want to overcome, others that we may want to enhance, right? It motivates the individual to want to undertake new and challenging experiences contextually aligned with these genetic predispositions. The organismic valuing process is the innate ability for judging whether a specific experience promotes or reverses or retards growth. So we have this ability to judge our own experiences as supportive of our efforts to grow or kind of interfere and inhibit our growth potential. And it provides interpretative information, right, for deciding whether the new undertaking is growth promoting or not. And most of us can figure that out, you know. It's like, boy, I'm going to read this book because I want to learn about this, and we say, well, that's definitely operating in terms of a growth mindset. Or I want to go and, you know, it's been a long week and I want to go to happy hour and have a couple beers. That is not really growth orienting, and most of us are able to evaluate that pretty straightforward. Now, Carl Rogers then talks in terms of self-actualization, but I love this term he uses as a fully functioning person. And, you know, Carl Rogers, the humanist, would go, well, what do you mean, the fully functioning person? I thought that's what I was. And he's like, well, let me define it for you first then and see where you stand on this. The fully functioning person, right, is a term for a self-actualizing individual whose self-concept is positive, and not only is the self-concept positive, it's congruent with reality. And notice how important this is. You know, if I think I'm the poo, but I'm the only planet on the earth, I'm the only person on the earth that believes that, then I'm not operating in a way that's congruent with reality. And notice that if someone has a profound level of narcissism, if they're a malignant or pathological narcissist or just an over-the-top narcissist, they may think they're the most bitchin' person in the world, but they're wrong. That others don't believe that. And that's one of the problems of narcissism, is narcissists believe that they are perfect or the best or superior. And thus they don't see any need to change. And this is why narcissism is such a bitch to treat, and often people consider it almost untreatable, because people believe they have arrived when they haven't. They're wrong, right? So from a therapeutic point of view, and remember Carl Rogers is a therapist, is I want to help people self-actualize, become who they are or can become. But all along the line, we got to kind of keep, you know, one foot in reality. That is, touch base with reality and see that they're operating in a way that's congruent with reality. This is one of my favorite Rogers quotes. When I look at the world, I'm pessimistic, but when I look at people, I'm optimistic. And when I read this quote to a class, I'm usually, you know, face to face with you guys, and I'm looking out there, and I can see as I look at you guys as individuals, I say, look at these Buckeyes, man. Look at these people trying to actualize. Look at these people trying to make themselves better. Look at these people trying to prepare themselves to contribute even more to the world than they already have. And how can one not be optimistic in interacting with you guys? But, you know, then I'll leave, and I'll leave the parking lot and drive home, and some son of a bitch cuts me off, and I'm like, you know, people should learn to drive, right? And at that point then I look at the world and I become pessimistic, or God forbid I get on Twitter and then I get entirely pessimistic. So Carl Rogers, fully functioning person then, what does that mean? We operate in a phenomenal field. Not unlike Kurt Lewin describes, right? This is our psychological reality. It's composed of one's perception and feelings. So in treating a patient, Rogers needs to first understand, what is this person's phenomenological reality? How do they view the world? How do they view their place in the world? What is their relationship to all of that? These guys are going crazy. The wind is blowing, in the window. We got Proton, Electron, and Kyle all just freaking out. So I can hear the wind whistling maybe a little bit. Two things then. Unconditional positive regard, right, is one of the most difficult things to attain, I think. And this is loving or caring someone, including yourself, with no conditions attached. So to what extent are you able to, with your partner, for example, let's talk in terms of partnership or child, right? To what extent are you able then to show this person unconditional positive regard? Right? That is, you are you, and I love you for you, and no matter what you do, I'm still going to love you. You can't take that away. And notice this is a great thing that we can say to our children. We may be very angry at something they did, and as we express our anger, I can't believe you did that. I'm so angry that you did that. And then make it clear, because the other part of this conversation to have with the child is, I love you, and there's nothing you can do to push me off that love. I mean, I love you, but I do not like what you did. And notice this is where we separate person from behavior. So we do this with our children to successfully raise them. We can also do this with our partners. But what Carl Rogers is saying as well is we have a need for unconditional positive regard. That is, we have a need to be loved for who we are, in spite of our frailties, in spite of our mistakes, in spite of our warts or whatever else, right? So Rogers comes at us with two basic human needs. Now Maslow, right, put at the top self-actualization. Rogers has got it there too. Need for self-actualization. Primary human need, according to Rogers, need for positive regard. Those two things function in tandem, and this explains kind of our perceptions of our outcomes. Now, in the simplified detail here is, if someone, the other's response, my partner, whoever, my teacher, whoever, shows me unconditional positive regard, the result is I can move closer and closer to becoming self-actualized and have that experience. What are you doing, Electron? Hi, buddy. Do you want some unconditional positive regard? We love Electron no matter what, right, buddy? Huh? Yeah. So he's a good boy. Now, suppose, though, we're in a relationship where the person gives us conditioned positive regard. That is, they will love us as long as we're behaving the way they want us to behave. But if we step out of line, what do? They smack us down. They punish us. They go silent on us. They blow up at us. They do passive-aggressive shit on us. Whatever the hell it is, right? Then we're living in a realm of conditioned positive regard. We're like puppets. We're being jerked around on their strings, and if we perform well, then we get to do the happy dance, but if we perform poorly, then they put us in the drawer and close it and lock us in there to suffer, right? When people show us conditional positive regard, it points out where we fall short. Those are self-discrepancies. So, partners and ourselves, if we're viewing ourselves, but partners make a difference, and they make a huge difference. If you can find someone who's willing to show you unconditioned positive regard, you're going to benefit as a result of this. If you hook up with someone who's always judgmental and always holding your feet to the fire about what you do, that is showing you conditional positive regard. That is withdrawing their love when they feel you don't deserve it and giving it back to you when you behave, right? Then you're going to be in a world of self-discrepancies. Your contact with them is always pointing out how you don't measure up. So, the process of actualization then, at birth, actualizing tendency and organismic evaluation process exists according to Rogers, right? So the need for positive regard, the emergence of the self is something that emerges from the time we're probably, 2 or 3 years old into adolescence. Is the need for positive self-regard, right? So in this case, the parental attitude, offering unconditional positive regard. Great parents say, I love you no matter what, right? Experience an evaluative accordance with organismic evaluation process all the way back here. Things are going well. I experience congruence. I'm behaving in a manner that seems to be congruent with my goals, and my parents are not putting a lot of conditions on me. And I grow into a fully functioning individual. But if the offering of conditional positive regard is what I'm met by the parental attitude, experience evaluate in accordance with conditions of worth, then in fact I experience incongruence, and I'm not likely to self-actualize as a part of this process. So we can't do anything about how our parents raised us, and in line with this module on positive psychology, we're not supposed to necessarily be spending a lot of time looking back. We need to look forward. And this can imply kind of a difficult strategy, that I have to connect to a greater extent with people who will show me unconditional positive regard, and I really have to maybe step back and question the relationships that people, when people are manipulating me through the use of conditional positive regard, because they have their interests at heart but not mine, even though they may say they have my interests at heart. If someone's giving you conditional positive regard, I think they're trying to mold you to what they believe you should be, rather than provide you opportunities to realize who you could be. And that's a big difference. And you find a great partner, hang on to that person for all they're worth, right? So, emergence then, fully functioning individual, onset of innate desire, impulse, or motive, acceptance, desire, impulse, or motive to be accepted as is into consciousness, and then the expression, right, is who I am is unedited. I'm not holding back. I'm being who I am. I'm communicating a desire, impulse, or motive. So we see there that we move from this lack of conditional constraint to the full experience or of being a fully functioning individual. And then what grows out of this? Well, the autonomy or causality orientation, right? So the autonomous human being, and remember when we were talking about self-regulation and your paper, those who are at the high level, right, of self-regulation, they become autonomous individuals. They rely on internal guides, that is their needs and interests, to guide their behavior, rather than external guides in terms of punishments and rewards. They pay closer attention to one's own needs and feelings, that they're in touch with this and able to do something about it. It relates to intrinsic motivation and identified regulation, if we want to go back there, because it's the self and one's image of the self and what the self is, who the self is, and what the self does that becomes central to the regulatory process. Correlates then with positive functioning. So they develop self-actualization. If we're going to talk Levenger's model, right, we're talking adequate ego development, beyond average Joe, if you will, higher level of openness to experience, and choosing experiences that facilitate the self-actualization. The control causality orientation, right, and these might be people also somewhat synonymous with those people who have an external locus of control, look at control of the being as outside themselves, right? They rely on external guides, that is social cues. And notice social cues, I'm going to do this, but now I'm looking around as I'm doing it to see what everyone else thinks and seeing if I'm getting approval or disapproval. Notice I'm seeking out conditional regard, and that would be a control causality orientation. Pay closer attention to behavioral incentives and social expectations. So I'm really concerned about what I'm supposed to be doing in this situation, and operating more as a follower than a leader. No, let me show you what it is we do in this situation, right? Rather than, oh my God, what am I supposed to be doing in this situation? And it relates then to extrinsic regulation, because most of the decisions are being made on the basis of externally generated stimulus and our response to that. Then introjected regulation, and notice that was still pretty high up on the regulatory scale, but introjected regulation, remember, people are operating on quite often guilt, right? Now, and that is an internal process, but it's motivated by external cues. Okay? So, what do we end up with? Growth seeking versus validation seeking. Growth seeking, I seek out opportunities that allow me to grow, kind of on the basis of what I believe will allow that to happen. Validation seeking, on the other hand, is I'm performing and then looking for validation. How did I do? What do you think? You know, and a lot of times that's not necessary. You know, I've given my share of talks over the years, and sometimes talks go really well, and I just walk away going, holy shit, I was on my game. That was freaking awesome. I laid that shit down, man. Other times I walk away from a talk and I go, well, that didn't feel right. That didn't feel good. And notice, it's not on the result of an audience poll or anything. It's a self-generated goal state that I wanted to achieve, and either I met it, exceeded it, or I fell short, and thus, have that response. So validation seeking, striving for proving self-worth, competence, and likability, which means that I need other people to supply that to me. Growth seeking is striving for learning, improving, and reaching personal potential. So I've already determined my potential, and now I'm measuring to see if I've done it. Right? Now, the vulnerability to mental health difficulties, right? What we see then is validation-seeking people generally experience greater levels of interaction anxiety, greater levels of social anxiety, are plagued to a greater extent by fear of failure, right? That generally have negative self-esteem results. They might persist on tasks for a shorter amount of time. Right? They're more likely to become clinically depressed. And so all of these then are the results of the difference between validation and growth seeking. So getting squared away with who one is, kind of in Carl Rogers' terms, being viewing the self in a way that's congruent with reality, and embracing one's kind of own innate growth potential and growth desire, and diminishing the effects of those who would show us conditional positive regard, kind of position us for growth seeking rather than validation seeking kind of lifestyle. So how do relationships then support the actualizing tendency? Because I've been kind of talking about relationships as we go along. To what extent is the person you're with able to display warmth? And notice that we can also apply this to ourselves. To what extent are we warm or cold to ourselves? To what extent is the person genuine with us? To what extent is the person empathetic, and that is, can actually put themselves into our shoes and experience our situation? The interpersonal acceptance, to what extent is this person able to accept us? And then the confirmation of the other's capacity for self-determination. And that is the kind of conversations. I have ultimate confidence in you to be able to become the best that you are capable of being. I'm here to support you in that, but I'm not here to direct you in that, and I'm not here to correct you in that, right? I'm here to help provide you opportunities for growth. And I can be, and remember, honesty was a big one that we talked about in those 6 points. I can be honest with you, but honest in a way that enhances your growth rather than critical of you, which may inhibit you attempting certain things. Notice how criticism can be used to manipulate, right? That is, to shut down behaviors. Constructive criticism is a strange term, and it's a very fine line to what is criticism and constructive criticism. Maybe we think in terms of reviewing performance and being honest about performance in terms of motivating growth. That to me has a different sense and kind of a different fundamental intent than providing someone constructive criticism, because it's still criticism. Okay? So, how relationships support the actualizing tendency then? 4 ways of supporting the actualizing tendency. Help others. Right? Relating to others in authentic ways. Be yourself, be honest, as we were saying. Promote the freedom to learn, and this can be to learn from mistakes as well. Right? Now, I told you so, but wow, I don't know if that one, did that go the way you planned? Did that go the way you wanted it to? And if it didn't, what can we do? Right? And notice that there's a different perspective, and defining the self, defining who you are, understanding your values, understanding what's okay and what's not okay in your book. So there's a song. Does anyone know? Teach your children well is one of the lines in the song. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Love the song. And to me, it kind of provides one of the core responsibilities that we have is preparing the next generation. If we're forward looking, and I know you guys have fallen to the term in your generation of paying it forward. So to what extent are we paying it forward, and how do we do that? Well, first of all, we've got to be authentic. We've got to be ourselves. We've got to transcend our cultural conditioning and become world citizens. That is, we can't be looking, and I'm sorry if this is sounding preachy, but it is kind of, we can't be looking at people on their category membership as being different and thus entitled to certain things while other people aren't on the basis of their category membership. We need to grow past this. We're all human beings, right? Consider race as a failed concept. There is no such thing as race. We have different ethnic origins, but race doesn't exist. It's a phony concept that's used to oppress, right? And so, become world citizens. Find their vocation in the right mate. Find a partner that works for you, right? If you need a partner, do that. And then find an occupation that allows you the opportunity to self-actualize, and keep sticking away at that. Know that life is precious and can be snapped away at any time, so better make the frickin' best of it, right? Be good and joyous in all kinds of situations, right? Even the tough ones. Learn from their inner nature, and you do have an inner nature, so be in touch with it. Don't deny it, and if you don't like it, then gradually shape it in a direction you'd like to see. See that basic needs are satisfied, right? So let's take page 2 of this. Refresh their consciousness, appreciate beauty and other good things in life, so develop some kind of relationship with art and something of a higher order like that. Understand that controls are good and complete abandon is bad. The controls, the big issue is where do they come from and how are they chosen. Transcend trifling problems because they are trifles. Let's grapple with serious problems such as injustice, pain, suffering, and death. That these are realities for all species across the planet. And think in terms of those things. And be cognizant and don't turn your back on those. Be good choosers. We're faced with choice all the time. Try to use our best judgment, our prefrontal cortex, to make choices. Be given practice in making choices, later allowing choices in their religious beliefs. So you can help children with a religion, but ultimately, and I'm so fortunate that my parents allowed me to choose my religion, and I thank them very much for that. With competing family forces and coming from highly devout people of different religions, you know, as part of my family milieu, it was always left up to me, and I appreciate my parents for that. You know, I was exposed to religion, but I was ultimately allowed to choose. And that is kind of the First Amendment of the United States. That was the beauty of it, because you could choose your religion. You could choose to be religious or not, and that's one of the core components of our Bill of Rights. All right, so we got to go to part 3, so I'm going to cut this off and we'll come back and do part 3.